Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest, one of my favorite guests, the guest that I've had on the most times, and that's Roberta Glass of the True Crime Report. So you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see a screenshot of her YouTube channel. And I reached out to her and said, hey, we should do a show. I've been kind of following her through the podcast and listening to intermittently the shows on Dee Garepi and his missing wife, and then this whole Adelson family situation in Florida. And so I gave her the choice. Hey, you want to talk to about one of these? And Adelson seems to be the most recent one she's covering. So we're going to cover that, this whole saga. We were talking in the pre-show. I said, this is really kind of like a saga. It started all the way back with the death of Daniel Markel, Merkel, back in 2014 in Florida, who was shot. And then it just came like the police investigation. There was some guy from the Latin Kings and his friend Sagredo Garcia, Luis Rivera. They were arrested, found guilty. Then there was another girl who was also concurrently prosecuted at the same time. I think it was with Rivera. Her name was Catherine Magbonua. And she ended up, I think some COVID kind of slowed down the process, but she then got, I think she was convicted, but then it rolled in and they found information on the Adelson family. So it was Wendy was the wife of Daniel Markel. And Markel was like a stellar academic and attorney and a lawyer. He went to Harvard BA and a JD and was teaching at Florida State University. And so she kind of got a job at that as well. But then her brother got, the trial finally started, I think just he was convicted last month. And during that trial, after he got convicted, the mother, Donna, she decides that she's going to run for it. So she tries to get on a plane with a final destination of a non-extradited country in Vietnam, but she gets caught at the airport. So she's in jail. And
she gets caught. Wait, I'm sorry. Can I just cut in here? Yeah. She gets caught going through the tunnel, that like tunnel that they put on. So they had to make sure that she couldn't argue that she was like just hanging out for the airport food or just dreaming about it. But she decided at the last minute not. They arrested her walking. I don't know what you call it on that tunnel thing. Causeway. I don't know what you call it, causeway. Yeah. In that, and then they grabbed her phone, and it was like a tug of war for her phone. She wouldn't give up her phone.
So she didn't want to give it up, right?
Very dramatic arrest.
And you've done so many shows on, I think you're probably like on 8 shows on different aspects of this. Wendy Adelson and her mother, and it's just a crazy case. It really kind of stemmed out of this bitter divorce and custody battle, and Roberta can talk more about that. So Roberta, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know. It's great. I mean, I always love talking to you. So thanks for agreeing to the interview. For people who may not have been following your research into the Adelson, what got you started? And you've had all these shows. You actually had somebody who was at Charlie Adelson's trial. Maybe you can just kind of do a quick overview from your angle, what you've seen.
Well, I interviewed Ruth Markel, Dan Markel, the victim's mother, on her book, The Unveiling. And I wasn't familiar with the story, and I just got absolutely addicted to it. And when Charlie's trial came around, I just started having hangouts, like, let's watch this trial. I'm going to be watching the trial anyway. Like, let's just watch the trial together. So I did some of those. And then I wanted to talk about what I was seeing. He's Charlie Adelson. So my interest, I come from, my podcast is a victim-centered podcast. I use the court records, case files, or I go to court myself. So I think that the best way to represent a case is to represent it truthfully and to not obscure the victim and to not make either the accused killer or the convicted killer a hero. And I think that's a real problem I have in true crime media. And my other interest, and I'm about to blow you away in about a minute and a half, And my other real interest is in this phenomenon of innocence fraud. And I think that's what brought us together, is our mutual interest in the West Memphis Three and reading your book and having a change of mind about Amanda Knox, the West Memphis Three, being fooled by all these documentaries and incredible PR campaigns. And Charlie Adelson, on his defense team, he has Josh Dubin running the jury selection process.
No, I didn't know that. Oh no, we talked about him.
He went through a few lawyers, Charlie Adelson. So, what I'm observing when I'm looking at trials, I'm looking or talking to lawyers. What I notice is that there are two different kinds of defense lawyers. There's sort of like the Jose Baez type that's willing to try to sell a jury, the Richard Gere in Chicago, tap dancing for the jury, willing to try to sell the jury on a bag of goods. That's, I guess Georgia Kappelman described it as garbage, their defense. And I might echo that sentiment. And and then there's sort of a more fair, a more moral defense lawyer who will just say, poke holes in the state's case and use what's really true and available to them, strong cross-examinations, those kind of things. And so amongst these kinds of Jose Baez's lawyers, they seems to be at an intersection, with of course, the Innocence Project, which I've been screaming about for the last 5 years and researching as the biggest fraud in America. And there's Josh Dubin, right from the Innocence Project, right from the Joe Rogan podcast, who loves to. So what they do is, what innocence fraud is about, it's about an ideology. So on one side, they want to get rid of the death penalty, get rid of life without parole, and cap all sentences to 20 years. So that's the ideological side. The other side is the money-motivated side. So that comes in with the podcasts and documentaries that help sell these cases and reverse these cases, which are, so they make money just because it's a great story, a wrongfully convicted man. Who's going to watch a documentary about someone who's guilty and convicted? Although I do think you could make it compelling. And then they go into our civil courts and sue. So they get this person out using innocence fraud tactics, using our media. Our media never questions, never fact checks, never goes to that I've seen. Generally, I think the one time it happened was in the Richard Glossop case in Oklahoma with a small publication called Frontier at the time, but they've changed hands and changed styles since then too. But they were really investigating the innocence claims of Richard Glossop and doing a really great job of informing the public. But there aren't many journalists that we have that will fact check, that will go up against this multi-billion-dollar movement. And how they clean up is in our civil courts, where once they get this person out, they sue anyone they can, and mostly it's your taxpayer dollars that are paying off these murderers. Now, quote unquote, exoneration, any kind of bringing someone from prison in that movement is considered an quote exoneration.
Right.
And the media will play right along. I mean, look at the movie Chicago. It's a really good example, except that it's in real time. Usually these campaigns don't start till about 14 years after, which means what I'm saying about them being guilty is a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more understandable, in that every appeals court has looked at it and denied it and affirmed guilt. And their last place that they can fight it is in the court of public opinion. And they often go into those arenas of TV shows, documentaries, and they win. They clean up
8
right.
figures, right? So these are not small settlements either.
Right. And they're coming from your tax dollars, and
your tax
the outrages, the silence is deadening.
Central Park 5 is a perfect example. Payouts $60 million straight out of the coffer. So it comes right out of the
125. Yeah.
Was it 125? Okay.
No, they wanted that. I'm sorry.
Oh,
sorry to interrupt you.
I thought that's all right, but they got paid real dollars, like huge dollars. So there's a huge interest in financial motivation for this whole process.
So my two worlds have just come together. When I was talking to Sonny, who went to Charlie Adelson's trial, and she's telling me about Josh Dubin and how disturbed she was by his whole aura and presence and what he was telling the jury. And I'm working on fixing some of the audio so you can really hear what he was telling the jury. He was like, how many of you, he cleaned out half of the jury the first day.
Wow.
Half went home. So Georgia Cappleman, how many went home after Georgia Cappleman's speech? Basically, he's like, well, you see, Charles Adelson, how many people thought that maybe he might have done something and he might have been guilty? And then he got rid of all of those jurors. Is that an illogical inference? And is that really an example of real bias? I don't know. I don't know.
Right. So he's actively involved in jury selection. He was actively involved in
Yes, he was part of Charlie Adelson's defense team. And now what we're seeing today, Julie K. Brown, who sat next to me at the Maxwell trial, who has been accused by victims of and sued by victims for writing unfairly about them and wrongly about them. I believe. Do you remember that lawsuit?
Absolutely. I know Julie K. Brown very well. She kind of broke the whole Epstein case. People were researching it in the alternate media, but once she published her series of articles, I think in the Miami Herald, that kind of made the story.
Well, she's joining Team Donna. So first we saw a op-ed, pro Donna op-ed within the last week or so. And now Julie K. Brown is throwing her hat into the ring and writing articles as if, Donna, joining her innocence fraud campaign, in my opinion.
Wow, that's incredible.
So it's amazing that this is going on so long, and that, what's happened with the Markel families, they've been cut off from seeing their grandchildren. They've actually changed Florida law by passing the Markel Act. So to stop this kind of grandparents, cutting off the grandparents after some kind of traumatic event like this. So
wow.
It
was just signed last year.
She's an amazing woman, Ruth. I mean, a powerhouse woman, and she impressed me in her strength and her intelligence.
Right. You interviewed her 10 months ago. So you interviewed her kind of even before Charlie's trial.
Yeah. And I don't think that Court TV or Law and Crime or whoever, or the Tallahassee Democrat, were really expecting the interest in Charlie Adelson's trial. I think it was really sort of more of a sleeper trial. And it just, people, once you start understanding this case, it's really hard to walk away from it. It's so emotionally engaging and interesting. They were smart people. I mean, they're not super geniuses like Dan Markel was, certainly, but they were smart people, and they planned this murder for hire, in my opinion, all of them together. And it's very hard to see Wendy Adelson walking around, who benefited the most as an unindicted co-conspirator in this case, still unindicted. And I don't think that she will be indicted until after, this is my prediction, until after Donna's trial, which I don't think will happen until a year and a half, quickest, maybe 2 years.
Right.
So it's going, I mean, every year is another year that the Markels don't get to be with their grandchildren. And it's just very tough to watch.
Where are the grandkids now? Are they with Wendy?
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
She got full custody, which was up. It was not just about custody. It's often also Dan Markel was asking the court to sanction Wendy for hiding assets and for not returning for hiding assets in their divorce and for not returning a Holocaust diamond. And so Wendy could have lost her whole law license. There was more at stake than this. Should a judge have sided with Dan Markel and his lawyers? If you want to listen to any testimony from Charlie's trial, I think that was Charlie's trial, listen to Dan Markel's divorce lawyer. It is the most moving piece of testimony. He's like, I wasn't a divorce attorney. I took the case because I just liked the guy and I learned so much from him. I mean, what a testimony to the strength of Dan Markel's character. And it was just very moving. He seemed to just really touch everybody that he came in contact with, and there were memorial services all over the country and the globe for him. Yeah, globe for
His
him.
friends are still talking too. Fellow professors and things like that are on Law and Order television. I think one of the other law shows, and they're still kind of. I saw his friend Solomon talking about it. He felt like he was being trampled on. Markel did, so he felt like, and he also,
they're bullies. That's my opinion of this family. I think they're a bullyish family.
And something happened with, like, the mother Donna was really ferocious. She had, I mean, there's, like, in the court transcript, she's talking all kinds of very nasty terms and stuff like that. So Markel said, "I don't want my children to be around her," and that probably just made her more angry. Would you agree with that?
Right. That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. That's also another really big humility. This is a family of pride, of public appearances being everything, money being everything, winning being everything, and they love revenge. So when Dan Markel heard his own children say, grandma says, it was a nickname, a Yiddish nickname
Gibbers.
for, it wasn't gibbers. No, it was a Yiddish nickname for an endearing nickname, meaning like, your father, grandma says, your dad is dumb. And which is such an odd thing for, of someone, Harvard educated.
Oh,
I mean, for all accounts, everybody said everybody who came in contact with him said this guy was smarter than me. So
yeah, he was like
insult,
a full professor
right?
at 33, and
Right.
I think he was, what do you call it? He had tenure at 38 or something. Like, he was set. He was done.
I mean, his blog blew my mind. I mean, if you like law and you want to start thinking about things, he will. I mean, what a professor he must have been. He had me thinking 50 different million directions, and had my to-do list planned with what cases to look at and how they could be considered and stuff. What an amazing mind, and an exciting mind he liked to argue all sides of the issue. And I love that. I love that kind of stuff. So, it's just so sad all around, to be, they seem to take, sometimes in these murder cases, you just kind of wonder why, someone was taken who was so valuable, to the community, and so loving to his children, and so loved.
Yeah, and all of their intent would be frustrated if Wendy gets arrested and tried. That means the kids don't see anybody. The dad's passed away, and there's no way a court's going to allow. I mean, they're all going to be in jail for the rest of their lives. Maybe the father, Donna's husband, the grandfather of the kids.
That's the wild card. Yeah, he's still the wild card in all this, but I believe Wendy will. And there's a lot of very interesting talking heads, defense lawyers on this case, who say there's not enough evidence to convict Wendy, and I strongly disagree with that. I haven't seen. What evidence is there? Well, she drove by the crime scene. She was seen by cops
day of the
driving.
murder,
right,
Yeah.
right. And she said she went out of her way. She had to go to the bar party, and why she was doing it so early. There's apparently liquor stores all over Tallahassee, but she said she took a shortcut and went by her old house, saw not just crime scene tape, got all the way that went across her mailbox. Her realtor called her concerned, but she wasn't concerned. She never checked in on her kids, and she did a 3-point turn, and then she started, phoning people. So, I think that's very compelling evidence. I think they can use her questioning in the police. There's a lot of very weird things. She does this technique. This is my opinion of it. My view of it is that she goes in there and thinks, what would an innocent person do? And so she says, oh yeah, he gave me a lot of grief, but my family would never do this, and I would never do this. And in fact, I used to, we have this family joke that Charlie, my brother, bought me this TV because it was cheaper than hiring a hitman. Now, what was her alibi for the day of the murder? Just coincidentally, fixing this TV that her boyfriend at the time said looked to his eye purposely taken a sharp object to. Someone purposely broke it, and not a fancy TV. And he begged her to fix it, and she demanded that they watch a movie night on it all together, so it would stick in his mind. And the kids were whining and crying and complaining, but it was more important to Wendy to have an alibi for herself than to really give any kind of pleasurable evening to her kids.
Wow,
So
that's crazy. And she was yeah, go ahead.
So this TV constantly comes into play here. So when Donna writes, texts Wendy, they're on their way, the geek squad is on their way, it's really what many people feel, including myself, is Donna's really saying the hitmen are on their way, which they followed Dan Markel out of his gym, followed him home, and then shot him in his driveway.
Right. No, it's incredible. So they have like weird code words, and the communications between Donna and Wendy and Donna and Charlie are what the damning things are. Like, they left a trail of communication that was really something else. And I think it was the communication between Donna and Charlie that led to Donna's arrest. But yeah, there's weird things about the television. And she was headed out that day to go get Bullet whiskey or something like that.
Bourbon, yeah.
Right? But the subconscious element to me, I don't think is lost on people who like, oh yeah, I want that one, the one with a bullet, and that's her ex-husband gets the bullet. Mm-hmm. How many times did she shot? Do you know? I don't know.
It was a few times in the face, and it was just. I mean, just what blows people's minds about this case is just the amazing psychopathy, I guess, behind it. The absolute lack of ethics, morals, feelings, and care for your own children. So even if you are, say, Wendy, and you don't like to lose, and your law license is in the balance here, you still care enough about your kids to say, I'll stick it out in Tallahassee till they're old, and I can move older. They're almost getting to it would almost be around, I think they're 13 and 14 now. It would be just, 4 or 5, 4 years from now, she could move. If Dan Markel hadn't moved on to a different, if they hadn't already arranged something differently or had moved on in his career.
Right. He could have gone somewhere else and taught
somewhere. Could have. I don't know if he had any of those plans. She, of course, said he did. One day he would move, but he seemed very in a groove there with the community and so beloved.
It really is amazing. And she wrote some kind of bitter, so-called, quote, fictional, unquote, book, right? Before the murders in 2013, where she like hated Tallahassee. She wrote despair, like it's almost like a data dump of her frustrations and anger and stuff like that. So she was willing to actually do like a Ramona Clef on the whole situation.
Oh yeah, and then she made a podcast too, after the murder. Wow. Where she called him her late ex-spouse, because it sounds like latex. Like, this is where antisocial personalities really miss, is that they don't get the nuances. They don't get why they can do a kind of maybe half decent performance of a real human being, but when it comes time for the details, like knowing that is totally insensitive and a no-go area, it's not funny. There's nothing funny about latex spouse,
Right.
They just don't, they just can't they can't read the room. They don't have those emotions, and they can't manufacture them totally in a realistic manner. And that's what we saw in her interrogation, in my opinion. We saw a woman trying to manufacture, hysterical crying over a man that she didn't, by all means, really was in a contentious divorce with, and was causing her tremendous difficulties, according to her. And not only that, it was so overbearing, because she loves to play the victim, that she had to give him these horrible nicknames to make him less scary, and also leave him in a really cruel way. When he was on business in New York City, she just took all the furniture out of the house and just left a few pieces of clothing that the boys had outgrown in a note.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry, not the note, divorce papers. left them there.
Wow. And I mean, so what was the lead up to the actual filing or getting divorce papers together? What was her excuse? He just was cheating on her, or was there something going on? Were they arguing? I don't know. I don't even know what led up to that. Do you know?
Oh, well, it's first started over. It's because, I mean, if you want my real opinion is that I think that Wendy could not stand being second banana to Dan's brilliance. And so he was very religious, and he became more so as their marriage went on. But she ordered non-kosher food at the wedding. There are plenty of kosher options in that area. It wouldn't have been hard to do. But in my opinion, I think she set down the flag there that this would be war, that they would war. This is war. My way or the highway. What are you going to do about it? This is a family. Donna and Wendy have both been on game shows at different times in their life. Wendy was on The Weakest Link, and so they like to win, and they didn't understand there's a breach with the oldest son because Rob, who's also a doctor in upstate New York and really beloved, and because he would return change if it was too much, and they would call him Honest Abe and say, why would you do that? Why would you ever return change when you got too much change? What a sucker you are. So they're kind of like this. I believe that, he somehow missed the antisocial personality gene, and the three of them all have it, and they're all bonded in it. It becomes very cult-like. When you have families like this, it becomes a very us versus them attitude. We're the Adelson family, and anybody who's not with us, we will exact our revenge against them. And Dan Markel became what Jeffrey Lacoste called, I'm not sure if he used these words, but the family pastime was hating Dan Markel. That was his impression of it. It all brought them together, and then they celebrated his murder with a big party.
Right, so they went out and had drinks instead of sitting Shiva, right? Didn't you mention that? They should have had if they were religious Jews, you'd have a week of mourning, right?
Right. No, right away, and you bury them right. I think Dan was actually buried right away, though.
Jewish law, you have to be buried in 24 hours or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're observant.
And so they're not observant Jews. I think they're more, I don't know how they would describe themselves, but more sort of a culturally Jew. You know what I mean? Like, what do you call it? Not culturally, like, I don't know what's a good word for it, but it's like a nationality and ethnic.
Yeah, like ethnic Jews, but not religious, not observant.
Right. So just very much like the Adelson family, like just the surface, but none of the soul. You know what I mean?
Soul, right. And so you think that the oldest son got away. So he's up in upstate New York on the other side of the country, north, south, to get away from all them. And you also made the comment. Yeah, he got it. He probably did the right thing. He's not involved in any of this, but the family kind of had this superficial, always smiling in pictures and always looking like the happy family, almost kind of like in a Stepford way. Right.
A real Donna went to, according to Wendy, she's an unreliable narrator, so we'll never know. But according to Wendy, she tried to go to Weight Watchers and they couldn't accept her because she was already at a correct weight. There was nothing for them to help her with. They both look to my eye like they've had plastic surgery. This is a very surface image. What they want people to envy them, and they status is very important to this family. So Donna picked out Dan Markel on J-Date, and it's a very odd thing to my mind to pick out a partner or maybe a potential husband for your daughter and not think that on J-Date, which the whole thing is based on your religion, and not think it's going to be an issue,
Right, it's odd.
They just thought they could bully him, and Dan Markel did not care to be bullied.
Right. Yeah, she wrote in the email too. Interesting emails written on the stand on the Charlie trial, but the prosecutors read. But it was like she was training Wendy. You got to do the best acting job of your life. You have to do. I mean, it's just incredible. Like, it's so incriminating to me. And also, Gibbers hasn't beaten the Adelson family yet, so it's like we're in
Mhm.
conflict with them. It's so strange, really weird.
No, I think that, from talking with John Lewin, who's known as the king of the cold cases, he tries cases in Los Angeles. He's never lost a cold case since he's been trying them since 2002. And so he tries like the hardest cases, the no body cases, the cases where some of these cases, the defense won't even acknowledge or admit that the person is deceased. And how he does it is by recreating the person's life and their usual habits and showing how disappearing forever would be a massive change in those habits. And I think that you could do the same thing here with Wendy, which is show, did she have a bad sense of direction? Did she often take this shortcut? And how, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of little things in this that add up, lots of little inconsistencies. It's really hard to plan and carry out the perfect kind of murder. And the fact that it's a murder for hire plot, and they covered themselves in some ways and really left themselves open in other ways. And of course, we can talk about maybe the bump a little bit later. When law enforcement came in and pushed them to start talking, basically tried to ask for $5,000, right? Tried to get them to pay, which would have been, of course, the most incriminating thing they could have done. But they did tape them talking. And when Donna's calling Charlie, she says, it concerns the two of us. Does it concern Wendy? No, no, no. But the way she denies it is very sus in itself. So I believe Wendy could be convicted. And by the time, see, the way I see this case is that they're making like a foundation, a house. If you can think about this case as a whole, it's a house. First, you have the shooters, then you have the middle woman, then you have Charlie, then you have Donna, then you have Wendy, and maybe the hardest person I would think would be Harvey. It would last, but they each case builds on the other one, and that's the way I think Georgia Kappelman is going about it, in a very methodical. She's a wonderful prosecutor, really fun to watch, smart, and she does a lot of out of the box thinking, creative questions that I wouldn't have thought of, and brings a lot of herself to the courtroom. I really enjoy watching her.
I mean, you've seen so many court trials now, like you're almost a specialist. I got to get you to write a book on trial observation, like you primers and hints, and you can judge like which case is good and which of the prosecutors aren't good in defense.
Well, I kind of gave Rashbaum a little bit too much. I don't know. I think I was a little bit too soft on him. I had no idea about Josh Dubin. And once you're bringing in, and people were saying there's this jury expert who's really high priced because, it's a money machine, this movement. It's a money machine. Like, that's all I can say.
Right.
And anyone who's connecting their train to Josh Dubin or the Innocence Project, in my opinion, I'd be very wary of. That's all I can say.
That would be my opinion as well. Very, very wary. There's a lot of very sus things associated with them. Right. So,
but they seem to weave in and out of. It's like I can't get away from this story of innocence fraud. It's like weaving its way into pretty much almost every case that I cover. It's so odd, They sort of insert themselves either by changing the laws or making them more defendant friendly, or replacing a district attorney with a former defense attorney. So you have a district attorney in name only. And what the reality of it is what you have is two defense attorneys talking to each other in court, no one representing the victim and no one representing the people. And I was saying last night, it's so sinister. None of us would say to Charlie, hey, maybe we can get him a former prosecutor as a defense attorney who would really act against his best interests. No, Phil Markel, Dan Markel's father, is walking out saying, after the guilty verdict, I'm really glad he had such a vigorous defense and such a professional defense. Because you want it to hold up. You don't, you
Right.
know,
Right.
you want it to, you want
Insufficiency
the
of
process
counsel,
to
right?
be fair
Yeah.
as
Sixth
possible.
Amendment, yeah,
Right.
no doubt. But that was like the whole thing we had about Adnan Syed is like you have two defense attorneys running the whole scam. I mean, it's off the charts.
Right. And then and none of the press will call it out. We've just watched what is in my opinion a massive fraud with Adnan Syed, and no one in the press is like, well, it's just the strength of this new evidence. None of it was new. And one
Right.
of the people, so what he got out on was the DNA on the bottom of Heyman Lee's shoes, not on her feet, but in the back of her car. A new suspect that was actually the from an interrogation or of questioning where the witness was describing Adnan Syed himself. So one of these new brilliant suspects that killed Heyman Lee was Adnan Syed himself. And not one person in the press said that called it out for what it was,
Right.
which
I mean,
was a massive fraud on the American public, massive fraud on our legal system. Everybody's too afraid of a movement filled, a well-moneyed movement filled with lawyers,
yes.
and it's a multi-billion-dollar movement. That's all I can
Yeah,
say.
they're intimidated. They have to be. There's probably only like 50 or 100 actual authentic journalists in the United States anymore. I mean,
Right,
there's very few
right.
who aren't just going along or just getting assigned something or doing something. Certainly not on TV. But when you see like a real journalist, you're like, wow, this is amazing. I was listening to Schellenberger last night talking about something with Tucker Carlson. I was like, oh, this guy's a real journalist. Holy smokes. It's so unusual. It's like seeing a
Right,
unicorn or something.
right. And they're ideologically aligned with them. A lot of these
Right. That's true.
journalists have been groomed in our school, in our universities and colleges to feel that may be the best way forward to end mass incarceration, quote unquote, which is another whole thing we can get into at another time, is just to let everyone go. So it's interesting that, this case is being tried in Florida, and I'm very grateful that it's being tried in Florida. But had this been tried in, say, Los Angeles, there's no prosecutors any experienced prosecutors to prosecute a case like this. There's just no one around. I mean, Gascon has just so decimated that DA's office and put in so many like pro-criminal policies, like, for example, gun enhancements. He's gotten rid of that. So if you commit a crime with a gun, it's no longer extra years. I mean, just everything for
A
the
disaster.
criminal. Nothing. He got rid of the program that notifies victims when their family, their loved ones, killers is coming up for parole.
Right. Got rid of that.
So
Wow, that's
they
crazy.
just, because they don't want them to interrupt the process and they don't want them to show up at the parole hearing, which used to be a right.
So they got rid of the gun enhancements here in LA, and now there's guys who have their own guns defending their families, and they are either going to jail or having their gun permits taken away. So not only are they getting rid of the gun enhancements, they're disincentivizing people from self-defense. It's off the charts. It's just like the civilization's going down the tubes, man. It's
I mean, if you live in Los Angeles, you have a great candidate there, McKinney, who was demoted, which is demoted for speaking out with John Lewin. There's about 30 prosecutors who were demoted in retaliation for speaking out against these pro-criminal policies. And which was funny with John Lewin, because he won this prestigious Ken Lamb Award the year before, and then right after, the next year, he's demoted from the cold case, his whole cold case unit that he built, that he, that's my understanding. So I may be wrong on that, but I believe he built that up. He was the crown jewel. I mean, what a rare and special prosecutor he is, with a brilliant, brilliant mind. Those are some of the most fun episodes I've ever done.
And it's a shame that these guys are not getting the credit that they deserve and to have their integrity treasured by the public. Hey guys, thanks for keeping us safe. You're really going after these criminals. Instead, they're like, you're part of the police system. You're putting people in jail forever. Blah 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 blah. So it's kind of like
Right.
sensibilities have been inverted, at least in my.
Right. It's a very you always hear about a policeman doing wrong and very seldomly about them doing well. You
They're
know,
all quitting too
like
right
it.
now. I mean, there's a real crisis.
Mhm.
They're not, a lot of these major cities, their cops are retiring. They're understaffed. I know San Francisco for sure, but all these other ones.
Mhm.
So like, it's only getting worse, kids. It's like not getting
Yeah,
better.
Martin Prybe just retired early because he couldn't stand working in Chicago, who wrote a great book. He's one of the few people who does speak out about innocence fraud or the subject of the wrongful conviction movement, which is really from Chicago. I mean, nowhere is there more innocence fraud than Chicago, left Chicago. And he says that what it does is it makes more in New York, they've lowered the standards for becoming a cop.
Right. So
So
they're not attracting the best.
you get it's like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecies. Do you know what I mean? So
Yes.
you get all this negative whip up all this negative feelings towards the police, and then all the really good policemen quit, and then the new ones that come aboard sometimes aren't, are really not the best. So
Right.
it
So
becomes a self-fulfilling prophecies kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like a doom loop. So you get the worst, and then they beat somebody, and then they shoot somebody, then they go, and it's
Mhm.
just yeah. Who are you gonna attract to do your policing? Like
Right.
your
It's
elected
just
people, your cops.
if you care about our justice system, and I don't think it's too much to ask to keep it fair and balanced. I mean that's I know that's sort of a triggering phrase, but
Right.
just to keep it you want a great defense team. You want those are the trials, we all live for. That's where it really gets where you can really see what really happened when you have two teams working really, you know, debating it out.
Right.
And
That's what
instead,
you want.
it just
Yeah.
seems like we're going towards a one, you can only have, you know, thinking you only can have sort of like one side represented. And that's a crazy proposal in our justice system. That's
Yeah,
nuts.
no, it's not good. It's not a
It's
good
not working
trend.
out well. I mean, we haven't had a famous murder case in New York City in how long? How long?
Because
Well,
people
we
just
seem
aren't
to
prosecuting them.
I don't know what it is. I mean, it seems like I read these news stories that would make seem like great trials. I think that they don't have it seems like there was something at the Maxwell trial that the prosecution team, that's now of course a federal trial, but was so demoralized and kind of unsupported. That's what it looked like to my eye. We had I'm forgetting her name now, but the district attorney was really who brought the charges against Maxwell, really experienced. She quit 4 months before the trial, and what we were looking at, nobody. Maybe I'm just an old fuddy-duddy, but I mean, it looked like I think the oldest prosecutor. I'd have to ask. I know my friend Nadia went to the trial, would know. I think that was like 36 or 34, and that seems like a baby to me up there. So.
Right, right. That's young.
And
Yeah.
they're up against this multi-million-dollar defense team of Maxwell's. It's just we seem to prosecute financial crimes. We seem to prosecute Donald Trump. I and no comment on that.
Right.
But and we seem to prosecute these kinds of trafficking cases like Maxwell and Epstein
Right.
and et cetera, et cetera. Mhm.
Certainly not the petty kind of thefts or small time thefts or whatever. Like they're just not
Mm-mm.
even worth their time, and that's why the whole cities are just rotting from the core. They're just being cored out, which is a disaster.
Mhm. I mean,
Have you?
everything's all locked up. Every store,
Yeah,
everything's all locked up.
yeah.
It's
It's like that
bizarre.
in DC, San Francisco, New York. It's
Mm.
crazy. Didn't used to be like that. Did you ever notice that that Wendy Adelson knows persuasion techniques and is using them on the stand? Have you heard of that and on Charlie's prosecution that she knows how to mirror? Like it's a technique where you answer exactly back to the question somebody's asking you. Did you go to the
It
store? To the store I went, they do this weird thing. Have you seen
it's
that?
it's a little bit like neurolinguistic
Yes.
programming, the
Yeah.
thing that Nexium uses so much. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
something very hypnotic and odd in her that everybody's picked up on in her testimony, and and her lies have been whopper. So that's another question because she was given immunity on the last 2 trials, limited use immunity, and she didn't. I mean, my perception of that is that's really for people who want to tell the truth. So it was odd because she's protecting her whole family and herself. She gets up there with this immunity and lies blatantly. So could they get her on perjury? I don't know. And will they do it? I know they rarely do it, but it might be useful in this case. And I don't think it would be all that hard to do. I know Sonny last night, who went to Charlie Adelson's trial, is of the opinion that she believes that Wendy covered herself well enough. I hope, Sonny, I'm representing your opinions correctly, at least on some of these answers in a lawyerly way. That would protect her.
She has to know the
would be hard to
techniques.
try her.
Yeah, as a trained lawyer. Where did she go to school? Did she go to Florida?
Brandeis.
Brandeis, yeah, pretty good.
And top of her class. You know, she's no slouch in the
legal situation.
Right. But she wasn't a Dan Markel. She wasn't a superstar. And they came as a package deal. She loves to put down Dan Markel for not getting this job in Miami. But the reason they didn't get it is because they had to come together and they didn't want Wendy. So
wow, right. So she was part of the package. Wow, interesting. She knows something. She knows these persuasion techniques. She's pretty clever. I don't know. I think they should just try to take a risk and try her, see what the jury says.
I think so too. I really don't think she will play well in front of a jury. I don't think lawyers smarter than I am have made videos 100 reasons why, 100 pieces of evidence against her. She could be indicted. She is an unindicted co-conspirator in this case. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of, in my opinion, from my experience, a lot of behind the scenes PR. Why is Julie K. Brown supporting Donna Adelson all of a sudden? Why is this doctor coming out of the woodwork? Who knew about Donna Adelson's arrest? Why was it announced via a podcast? And good for the podcast and good for them for the scoop. And it was fun to find out in that way. But
right.
Wouldn't it have been kind of more, might it have been? I don't know. You never know whether they're going to take questions or any questions, or whether they would have, had they announced it the next day in a press conference, at least the people that the law enforcement and the state's attorney's office could have gotten the credit they deserved for arresting her and being on top of it. And kudos to the friend of the Adelsons who got this weird phone call from them and called it in.
Wow. Interesting. One of the other interesting things about this case was like Donna threatening, I don't know if it was either Markel or through Wendy, like they were going to convert the kids to Catholicism and get them baptized. Did you come across that at all?
I'm sorry. Can you ask that one more time?
I was saying that there was a statement that I heard in one of these talks. I don't think it was yours, but the mother was going to threaten Markel to convert the kids to Christianity and Catholicism.
Yes, Catholicism. Yes.
Sounds funny to me, but it's that, I mean, and like baptize them, was that like just to kind of get back at Markel? Like, would you think that
Markel, Dan Markel, that they, and she also wanted to dress them up in SSI, Nazi outfits.
Oh, so, really? Wow.
So that will show you how paper thin, to my feeling as a Jew who was, my dad my mother's half Jewish. My father was fully Jewish, converted to my mother's religion of Quakerism, which her father had converted to. It's a crazy life.
Interesting. So you're truly a hybrid. So, you're a hybrid on both
definitely.
sides.
I was denied sort of the religious, I'm not familiar with the religious side of Judaism the way other, Jewish people are. And I would never even think, no matter how much I hated my what do you call it, son-in-law, of thinking of doing that to the grandkids at that age. I mean, just this absolute narcissistic need for, and also it shows me that, what I think that they have a lot of they wrestle with real issues of self-hate around their Jewish identity. What other Jewish person would want to do that? Self-respecting person say, oh, dress up the kids to get revenge, for the purpose of revenge, gross. To use something. And also knowing that Wendy is holding on to a piece of the Markel's family history, a Holocaust diamond.
Right.
I mean, what's going on here? But you make big problems for the eldest son because he fell in love, really madly, love of his life, was not Jewish and wanted to marry her, and instead married someone else and then annulled it, and and they said, oh, we'll accept her, and then this blew up. Then Dan Markel was murdered and he figured it out. I believe that's the correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the scenario, chain of events there. So what kind of family demands, you have to think that my point is everything's on the surface. There's no soul to this family. Absolutely soulless in my view.
Did you ever hear anything about financial fraud or Medicare fraud associated with their business? I thought I read something about that. Did that ever come across your
Yeah, well, I haven't dug deep into it yet, but it's very interesting to me that on the wiretaps, what they did is they put a undercover guy he's on video. He comes up to Donna, who's picking up the grandkids. This is post Dan Markel's murder. And the investigation's at a standstill and they want to sort of get them talking, So, and really the aim of that was to get one of them to pay up this. So this undercover cop comes up to Donna and with a picture of Dan Markel, a news release of his murder, the figure $5,000 and a phone number. And they all sort of played hot potato, as my guest last night, Sonny, said, with it. No, you call. No, you call. And Katie, the middle woman's doing this kind of very streety thing where she starts screaming at Charlie that the number's wrong, basically putting it on him, like trying to put him on the defensive, which is a very street tactic, and off of her, the attention off of her that she won't make this call. Eventually, Donna calls and says that you should go to the police if you know of anything about it. But of course, she never went to the police and said someone's trying to extort me. She never paid the money, but certainly that's because we know from the communications that they all figured out it was an undercover cop. So,
gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, this is amazing. It's an amazing case, this whole situation, and that it's not going to stop. I mean, I don't see anything. I think that they'll probably work on her for a while. She's got to be pretty concerned that she could be indicted. What do you see in the future?
I think this PR, I hope people are seeing this for what it is, which is PR. They have PR people working behind the scenes. These things are not coming out because people are so in love with Donna Adelson and so believe in her innocence. This is in my view of studying this, they hitched their wagon to a movement that I really understand. This is how they work. This is how they move. They take out op-ed pieces. Usually this happens way after, the conviction, but they're doing this innocence fraud campaign in real time for Donna and Wendy, both. And
so
who knows what else is going on behind the scene.
Do you think that Dubin not only is involved in jury selection, but also in the propaganda side of this case as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh yeah. He knows all the tips and trips.
So he's getting paid.
It's very much like I don't know all of what they do, and I know that when you work for the Innocence Project, you have to. What I've heard is that you have to sign a non-disclosures agreement, but it is all I can say is think of Chicago, think of Richard Gere's character, and think of the way the press related to his clients, and that's what you have with an innocence fraud campaign. Everybody repeating it. Nobody checking in on it. And the problem is you can do that 14 years after a conviction when it's all forgotten, and you can start obscuring the truth and playing with facts. And, but here we've all seen these trials. It's all been this is in real time. Right. It's not working. This is the most informed audience I've ever had on any case. They know, most of them know way more than I do, honestly, William Ramsey. Wow. I mean, they're absolutely an incredible group of people who are all kind of just really committed to the idea that justice be seen for Dan Markel. And, it's like, it always makes me really uncomfortable. I say this is an incredible case. It's an incredible case, but it's like incredible sorrow for the Markel family. They're never going to, never be the same again. Something irreplaceable has been taken for them, and that's why we demand justice.
Yeah, amen. He had a lot of years left. He could have contributed in, who knows, all kinds of ways. I mean, the guy was obviously brilliant, but yeah, it's a shame for just like people arguing about custody. But those divorces, sometimes they just get. This is a perfect example. Overheated, they feed into each other's anger and anxiety, and then somebody says, "Let's do this." I think that's probably what happened. And do you? I mean, was Charlie kind of a womanizer? I mean, I keep hearing these rumors that he was just about money and women at that time. I don't know if he's married or whatever.
Oh yeah. No, well, now he has a baby with a woman, but he had a rotating cast of women going, usually Latina women, not all, but anyone he could control and manipulate. And then he also took trips to South America to
they were like sex
be with
trips.
children, to have
really?
relations with children. Yeah.
Was that confirmed?
So, I mean, I would call them children. I don't, but if you want to use a euphemism, if you want to use underage women, if you want to use teenagers or whatever other kind of euphemism you want to use, but essentially it all boils down, in my mind, to a child.
Right. So, wow, that's crazy. Where was he going? Colombia or something like that?
Vietnam was one of those stops. Wow. Yeah, all over. Yeah.
Southeast Asia, yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy, there's social media video of him getting his feet done among in a spa in Vietnam. He's very comfortable, according to Jeffrey Lacasse, of living outside the law. And he was the dyslexic kid. He didn't have he needed his family to get him through, to pull strings with a Broward County judge to get him to graduate from dental school. Oh, wow. That was one tip. So he was the black sheep, and now desperately in need of the love of his mother and the approval of his parents. And how do you get approval in this family? By doing, I mean, it's just so odd.
Right.
Right.
You become the middleman.
By immoral and getting over and getting revenge. And, it's just, they don't have any kind of moral center. And that's something Dan Markel really did have. He felt very close to his faith. And so much of if you read his writing about the law, so much of it is about a wrestle with morality.
Wow, that's so crazy. I didn't know that part. I vaguely remember reading that, but wow, I didn't know that aspect to it. Roberta, we are at the hour mark. Is there anything you would like to add, or how would you like to wrap this up? Is there anything else we need to cover?
No, and thank you, Rude Irish. I appreciate the kind words and the super chat. We've heard some of the evidence in Charlie's trial, and it's quite damning. She was the one paying the checks to the, signing the checks from the Adelson Institute, which I love, their dental clinic, or not clinic, or dental practice is a better way to put it. And that's very damaging. She wasn't really working there. It was a fake job for the middle woman. And why was, and certainly fleeing, she's made the best evidence against herself. I think the strongest piece of evidence is her fleeing. I mean, that shows consciousness of guilt, and her hanging on to her cell phone, not wanting what's on that cell phone. And that's what we've seen. Is it a subpoena you get, or it's a warrant? A warrant. Yeah. A warrant for,
warrant
to go through. Right? Yeah. To get all the computers and the cell phones and go through it and find the property. So things have been searched, and that's my understanding. In the Harvey and Donna's Adelson's home. So
has been searched and stuff. And I thought I read somewhere that was like 35 hours of discussions between Charlie and Donna on a jail phone. Like, holy smokes, they're not that criminally sophisticated if they're even talking that much on a jail phone, which is, I think, not considered an invasion of privacy. I mean,
Right. Why didn't she just go? I mean, it will just show you their weirdness. Why didn't she just go and have a visit? Are they
right.
they can't tape those visits, do
I
they?
don't
Do
know.
they
I
tape?
don't know
I
about
don't
that.
think
I know
so.
the phone calls are.
I don't I thought so too, but she was saying she was going to either end everything or she was going to oh, thank you, Chateau. She was going to end everything or flee the or get, basically or flee the country. I mean, what a way to telegraph what you're going to do and
Right.
show your hand. And thank heavens for the, basically what they did is they got in touch with a couple that they hadn't talked to in years and told them, we're going away. We need some advice for our trip. And they thought it was really weird and called the police. So that will show you that they are social pariahs amongst their old group of friends. If immediately a weird phone call from them, from the old friends at Adelson's, you know what I mean?
Right. You
Think
know
I
the
need
Adelsons, holy smoke. I have no idea who those people are. I never knew them, blah, blah, blah. I bet nobody
right,
wants to know them because that, like, I
right.
mean,
And we also saw
creepers.
the tour of Charlie Adelson's friend, Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was really close, besties with went on these trips to South
Oh, wow.
America with Charlie, doing a kind of tour because and I'm sorry that he's going through this because was a witness in the trial that he feels he's getting a lot of hate. I don't know in what form, if it's just he's reading the comments and they're not positive, but he did a lot of interviews trying to resurrect his image.
Wow, interesting. I think we'll be hearing from this whole story again in the future. I'm not surprised, but thanks so much for your time. Thanks for all your knowledge and doing all the
Um,
work and researching all the stuff. I really appreciate it. Where can people, if they're listening to my side of the stream, where can they find your podcast, YouTube channel, and anything else that
sure.
you're up to?
I'm at Roberta Glass on YouTube, at Roberta Glass Pod on Twitter. I'm actually I refuse to call it X, but I'm actually on Twitter quite often. I'm on Facebook. I have my own Facebook group. You please come join this discussion in there. I have Patreon or buy me a coffee. Links are usually in the description of my episodes. Please support my work. Leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I hate my self-promotion. I'm very bad at it, but I think I hit most of the general things
Yeah,
that are required to keep my podcast, going.
yeah. So you can see the podcast, and you can see if you're watching YouTube, this is the live section. Go check out the video section too. So there's some of the older interviews, and that's where you can find the interview Roberta did with Dan Markel's mother. So that was like 10 months ago.
Ruth,
So I need to
yeah.
go back and listen to that. But another great show. Thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Stay there.